Testing. Your lab procedure says 24 hours. Look at it, but I think you probably want to wait like a couple more days, so we're going to check them on Monday. On Monday, we're also going to open your Petri dishes, which smell so good.
Really? Does not smell good at all.
Oh, really? Here, I'll help you.
No, I'm fine.
Oh, no, you're not. You haven't lived.
It doesn't smell good.
Oh, God.
Smells like death.
This is the best demo in the world. I just love doing that. I'll tell you a secret. One of the reasons I do that is all the kids that sit in the front for the last week have been thinking it's me. Like, I'll walk by and stir up the air, and the kids are like, and like, look, it's not me. It's like next week it'll be fine. But yeah, they've been sitting right here, so the smell is horrific. We're gonna open this on Monday. The whole classroom will smell. It's awesome.
What do these smell like?
I don't know, man. I don't know. Jesus hates us. Take this to the conference. Miss Khan, Elena Khan, 103, I believe.
What was it? 103?
103. Next Monday, we're going to measure your soils, and we're going to talk about your water retention and chemistry tests, which frankly have kind of a lot of variations. So those two features, hopefully your results will fall somewhere within the scope of reason. We'll find out on Monday. Something I hope everybody noticed from our lab yesterday is that the pre-lab actually kind of makes a difference when we get to the more detailed nitty-gritty sort of labs. And a lot of my labs, like, they really do take much of the period or all of the period. Also, something which I notice is most of you are really responsible for yourselves, and I just want you to know that I like truly respect that on a human level. Like, when people clean up their own messes and are like helpful, that's like a really big deal. And you may have noticed that like some people are such like space cadets that they just like sprawl their impact everywhere. And I don't know how to help with that. So maybe you can all help police each other, like, yo, you dropped all your paper napkins. Because that kind of, for me in general in life, like that gets really old. Okay. Anybody want to talk more about the lab? Feedback from me about the lab? Questions about the lab? Did we finish 4.2 yesterday?
Yeah. 2 days ago.
So yeah, 2 days ago. So let's do 4.3 today, please. Questions on the vocab in 4.3?
Dominance and codominance.
Dominance is when a forest has a single tree that's most common. Codominance is when there's like a couple that are by far the most common. As opposed to like a mixed forest, which has a little bit of everything. I can give you an example of dominance that might surprise you a little bit. If you look behind my son, behind my kids, behind my wife, behind my daughter, in that whole landscape, behind my daughter, behind my head, right in that photo. Almost all of these photos, if they are from Tuolumne Meadows, every single tree is lodgepole. Like, I don't even have to, like in this one where my daughter and I climbed a tree and you look in the background, there's a bunch of trees, or like this one with a whole landscape of trees. Like, all of those behind my son right there, they're all one species. Because that is a lodgepole-dominated forest. Next vocab.
Not impressed.
I know, I was just thinking that.
The poor last seagull to take off was like, oh, I want to take this Ziploc bag with me. Seagulls in plastic bags, man. I'm like so into it. The little like sandwich foldover bags. I've always wanted to like go to the beach and just like have like a clean box of plastic bags. Like, eat seagulls and haven't like had a feed for the bags. Any other boat count on 4.3?
Suppressed.
Was that in the same section as dominant, codominant?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, so suppression is where trees in the understory are covered and shaded by others. Oh, Thorpe, you didn't put your name on the one that just got delivered. You need to go see Miss Con.
Okay.
The last thing I'll do is patchiness and patchiness and thinning. It's actually two separate study goals that are part of study. Sorry, excuse me. Two separate terms that are part of number 25. Are we done with the other vocab? So study goal number 25, please. I really like talking about this because I realize most of you have probably had like a personal relationship with this issue. In number 5, trying to manage fire in wilderness. This is one of the things that we've been most wrong about as a nation and the environment. Our national policy on fire prevention is like one of the stupidest policies that we've ever had in relation to the environment. We were so far off. And before I get into that, how many of you have been affected by wildfires in Santa Barbara, had to evacuate? Anybody have their home actually damaged or lost? Which was it, damaged?
Yeah.
Lost? Dang. Where were you?
Montecito.
The Hesacita fire? Gap fire?
T-Fire.
T-fire? Yeah.
The Hesacita fire.
I'm sorry to hear about that. I lived on West Camino Cielo for a decade, so I evacuated like 7 or 8 times. Luckily, thank you. Luckily, my own home was never burned down, but we've had fires get really close. My wife and I, like. By the way, how many of you have evacuated? How many of you like had a chance to pack before having to evacuate? Weren't you surprised how little stuff you wanted to take? Did that happen to you?
I took everything.
Oh, really? Okay, well, maybe it's our age difference. I realized when my wife and I were evacuating and we're like, we really got to get out of here. Like, we could probably get more stuff, but we really got to go. We look around and it's like, photos, sleeping bag, climbing gear, dogs.
Kids.
Oh, the kids! I always forget the kids. Yeah, did you just raise your hand? Okay. I'm always surprised, like how little. My wife and I would think, like, if we had an extra hour to pack, we wouldn't even waste that hour getting the stuff. But maybe that's us. That might just be a measure of how crappy our stuff is. That's probably because we have crappy stuff. Yeah.
I can't remember which fire it was, but I always have to evacuate. And I went to Roosevelt. This is in elementary school. And I like went out of school and I looked up and I saw like that my hills were like on fire. It was like smoking. And so I walked home. So I walked home from school and I called my parents, but they were in LA. And so I had to evacuate by myself with my brother because he had to come home. And so like it was like the scariest thing ever.
Wow.
And I, like,
Home Alone, the fire edition.
Yeah, they just took one car. My brother could drive, and so I just packed the car in the garage, and I was waiting for him to come home. So like, I literally just got like the dogs in the car and all the photos, and that was it, and my clothes. The dogs.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. I hate you, Mom. What's wrong with that?
It was the scariest thing ever.
And yeah,
I mean, like, for, like, the fire evacuation, my parents didn't do anything, whereas my friend's neighbor, what's it called, took her TV and everything. Like, it was a flat screen TV.
Right.
He left
Gotta
all
have
the
TV.
gadgets, and he just took his TV. He was like, that's my most prized possession.
like,
That's like for the T-Fire, I was
yeah,
young and only grab the Xbox.
I believe, yeah, exactly. Like if you're young enough, yeah, he just took his Xbox. Yeah.
We put my mom's like best friend at the school. We put like all our photos and like a bunch of like silverware and like all of our like valuable stuff in like watertight bags and sunk them in the pool, and it was fine.
It's so
That's
bold with your
smart.
photos.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
What if the bags leak?
No.
Oh, dang it!
Yeah, the fire doesn't even come near your house. I just grab like all the food and leave. All the bags.
The refrigerator.
Yeah, just unplug the fridge and move it out.
But after we'd been up there for a couple of years, my wife and I would just sort of like leave all of our stuff that we wanted to evacuate in like one area of the shed. So really, like our organization method was like least valuable to most valuable. So if there's a fire, it's like everything's right in the front of the shed. You just take it and go. It's kind of creepy, right?
Yeah.
It's just like you and these heads of like dog, babies, bees.
I actually am really intrigued by the taboo nature of that. Check out this thing.
Yeah.
That's weird. It was still even.
Have you guys seen my candle?
Oh, it's a candle. That's great.
Because I think it's romantic.
It's a fertility candle.
That's right, that's right. I have this because my homie made an art exhibit where he molded these.
Was it like an entire baby?
And then he had an art exhibit where he had an art exhibit where he lit them. And so there was like a room with like no lighting except for all these baby heads on fire.
So creepy.
And,
Haunted house decorated.
no, they're really carefully designed. So like the angle, I got this one for free because the angle was wrong. But when he made most of them, they were made so that they like stood a certain way. So as the flame burned its way in, the eyes would start to glow.
Oh my god.
And then he made a round where he had a glob of red wax in the middle, so they would cry red wax. Totally gnarly, right?
Serial killer.
And his exhibit was about like,
These real baby heads.
isn't it amazing that we have such an emotional response to certain concepts? Like, if that was an elbow candle, people would be like, or like even if it was a baby-sized elbow, people would be like, that's a dumb candle, it's all crooked. But like, it's a baby face, and that's different, and like, that just sort of highlights our relationship with looking at each other's faces, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, like my friend once strapped babies to the front grill of his Suburban.
You mean dolls, right?
No, we don't. He didn't say, he didn't specify. He just said babies.
It's like 4 babies, and he did like every race, so no one would say he's being racist.
Very
He
good.
strapped him to his grill, and he got like notes on his car, like 6 notes. One time he went into the grocery store at Lazy Acres.
Of course it's Lazy Acres.
Yeah, he parked it there just to see what would happen. But yeah, he got like 6 notes saying like he's a horrible human being and all this stuff.
A, I have a baby head on my car, and it's been there for like 2 years, so maybe that makes me horrible. I don't shop at Lazy
Well,
Acres.
it was like kind of bad. Like they were like strapped like bungee corded to the front of the grill. It's like,
Okay, that was fun. The reason I mention the fires and the evacuations is because if you talk to like your parents or your grandparents, they might tell you that fires weren't really that bad when they were younger. Like when I was a kid, we had the Painted Cave fire here. Anybody heard of the Painted Cave fire?
Happened again recently?
Well, there have been a couple of Painted Cave fires. That area is kind of prone to fires because it's kind of crowded and like older building styles. And they've had a number of. In my life, I've seen 3 fires in the Painted Cave community. But the Painted Cave fire was 1987, 89 maybe, 90, 89, 90. It was like about 25 years ago. What?
We need Paul to bring Ross in his costume. We'll be very quick.
Wait, Paul has school right now. I'm sorry about your needs.
We need him.
For what?
We all need Paul.
I need Paul.
No, I need Paul more.
I need
Let's fight over
I
it.
need him. Yeah, that's good. Oh god, so quick.
What if your dudes?
No, really quick.
Get out of here. Get out of here.
Oh. Well, you have to see.
This is school! Go away!
Yeah, exactly. Was it? I had this recurring dream when I was a kid where I was like at my friend's house in Painted Cave, alone as a baby in a bathtub, and there was like a Painted Cave fire going on. I don't know why it was recurring, but it's weird. It's so weird, and I don't know why.
The most likely interpretation would be when you were a child, you heard people telling that story and you've internalized that as a fearful thing.
Maybe.
Because we're very sensitive to what makes other people scared, especially when we're children. It's how we learn what to be afraid of.
There's a story about a baby trapped in a bathtub during a fire.
It was like outside.
This is probably blending a couple of his childhood fears. The abandonment issues are separate, and then the fear of water, maybe because you're a redhead. Yeah. What? Okay, so here's the issue. That before the Painted Cave fire, we hadn't had mega fires in this area. Always we've had fires. Fires go back until like the history of time. But fires are getting worse. It's not climate change.
Didn't they say it's like the material we have too? It's like watching this research, like the couch from back then didn't like burn that easily, whereas the furniture right now.
I'm not talking the home fires. As far as a fire in a house, totally different conversation, but I'm talking fires in wilderness. Historically, fires were small. Anybody know why they were small?
They would burn through regularly, so there wasn't as much to burn.
Right. They would bump into the last spot that had already burned down. They wouldn't get super hot because there wasn't that much fuel to burn in the first place. So the wind would stop them, or a creek would stop them, or a wet grassland would stop them. That's called patchiness. Please look up. Like this. That's patchiness.
Should we draw that picture?
I don't care what you draw. This patchiness is the concept that a natural landscape has patches at separate stages of recovery. The spot that just burned last year, that'll just start to sprout. That'll be early secondary succession. See, early secondary. And the spot that burned like 2 years ago, that is still early secondary succession. The spot that burned 5 years ago, maybe we're getting into mid-succession. Spot that burned 20 years ago, that's probably like late secondary succession. Remember what I said about the successional things, where you go from the really generalist to the kind of in-between to the more specialized stuff? And eventually, look at the 100-year burns. Those are going to be back to the climax community. Those are going to have all the birds and all the mammals and all the stuff. That's like the mature forest. Bailey, are you playing with your face or are you raising your hand?
No, I need
Okay.
hair.
It's all fine. I mean, no, it's not. It's a total mess, but I mean, it's fine that you're asking. It's being mean for fun. So watch, if a fire starts right here, you know, as long as the wind is blowing that way, that fire's not going to get too big, because if the wind's blowing that way, it will just kind of fizzle out against those few grasses in the 2-year burn spot, leaving a patch that will now start to recover on its own. Yeah?
Are you saying that it just basically stops because it can't burn on like recovery grass?
Yeah, usually a fire is not going to burn too fast or too much at all if the fuel isn't there. And you know, fires just fizzle out. Like literally, unless there's like a significant swelling fire for some reason, if you're on fire and there's no wind here and there's not a ton of fuel, I probably would never catch on fire. I'd just watch you burn. I mean, see, the fires don't spread like crazy, as opposed to this. If we're talking like 100+ year single area where nothing's burned in 100 years, that's what you've been seeing. Those are fires that generate their own wind because there's so much air movement. Those are fires that will catch big stuff on fire, and the rising hot air will blow flame through the air. When the Painted Cave fire happened, when I was a kid, I think I was in like the 5th or the 6th grade, pieces of burning roof shingles flew all the way from Painted Cave on the top of Camino Cielo, all the way down to Hope Ranch, across the freeway. Because when you get hot enough, fires do crazy stuff. Everything that you've heard about fires jumping miles, getting super, super crazy hot, that's all the absence of patchiness. Because we thought we had to save the trees from fire, like putting an umbrella on a tree when it rains. Like, just because it bothers us doesn't mean it's going to bother the forest. Fire is natural. We should never have stopped fires. First?
Yeah, is that due to clear cutting? Is you cut them all at once and they all grow back at the same time?
No. It's due to the fact that beginning with Aldo Leopold, who was like one of the first humans in the United States to propose like a wilderness conservation ethic, we've been like so worried about protecting wilderness that we literally would put out fires. This was a decision the government made. Smokey the Bear, you know, you can stop wildfire. Like, we've been spending money to make firefighters that would hop into the wilderness and put out fires. Yeah?
So how do we stop this here?
Well, to recover from the absence of patchiness, we now have to spend a ton of money to make artificial patches. It's called thinning. Patchiness is this natural patchwork of different stages of succession, a history of many small fires. Thinning is like this. When you go into a forest to take out some of that fuel, lower the potential for fires. You're lowering fuel loads. You thin the forest. Like, have you heard, like when dudes like me get old, our hair starts to thin out? You know what, you've heard that term, thinning? Does that mean we're bald?
No.
That means there's just like more space between the hairs. So thinning of a forest is more space between the trees. If you're all trees, I cut him down, I cut her down, I cut her down, I cut her down. Just to give you more space. You can thin a classroom by just getting rid of some students, make more space.
Wait, how is that? You saying the way to prevent the growth of fires, like how big they are? How is
It prevents a few things. And so this is the part that I want to, this is the last thing I wanted to do here. In this forest, you've got lots of fuel. So the fires are really hot and they're really big. right? In this forest, you've got patchy fuel. So they are less extreme, not as big and not as hot. So which of these will recover faster and why? Yes?
Patchy recover faster.
Why would that recover faster? I mean, you're right, yeah. Why?
Because there's already like stuff with seeds right next to them.
Yes. You've got seeds nearby and in the soil. If it doesn't get too hot, the seeds survive under the ashes. So your seeds survive and your wildlife returns. It moves from next door. Everybody understand what I mean by that? All those other patches, like these deer, they're going to make it. So when this spot catches on fire, don't worry about it. Deer will walk right back. In 1 or 2 years, you've got all your wilderness back. But unfortunately, you guys know that everything I talk about is Yosemite, right? This was the situation in Yosemite until about a decade ago. In some parts of Yosemite, the national park has spent money thinning to lower the intensity of fires. But before we could get to it, a big chunk of the forest near Yosemite burned last summer. How many of you heard about the, what was it called?
Ridge fire or something?
Yeah, it wasn't the Rim Fire?
Oh, yeah, maybe.
The Rim Fire. Has anybody heard the Rim Fire? It burned, like, here's Yosemite, and it burned up this area. When that fire came in, it burned through areas that haven't, where we have prevented fires in a long time. As far as the eye could see, up and down canyons, there was uninterrupted fuel. And you know, canyon fires do crazy stuff because of the way that the air moves in a canyon. When you put a fire there, they get extreme heat. Apparently, I just found out, there are satellite images that show small pockets of flames so hot it literally burned blue. Like super high intensity fire. I found out that the Rim Fire, apparently this is new stuff. I'm not sure if, look, if you want to fact check me, it's probably smart. But I've heard the Rim Fire was the first fire where we've seen the fire got so hot that nutrients in the soil turned to vapor form and left behind ash that has no nutrients in it. It's like volcanic ash. They say the fire was over 1,000 degrees in some places, so all the nitrogen went back to gas and there was no nitrogen left in the soil. All the phosphate and potassium went back to gas forms until there was no NP or K left in the soil. So even though you've got sand and ashes, nothing is growing in the Rim Fire area. Yeah,
What is the thing?
some parts of the Rim
What's
Fire.
the thing you do with the helicopter when they go and put that green stuff down?
So the idea there is to prevent erosion and encourage recovery. Because our fires are so gnarly, we're worried that the whole hillside will wash away before seeds reach those patches in the dirt. Like if you're the only desk that caught on fire, all these other patches can drop seeds in a year, you'll start sprouting again. But if you're in the middle of like half the school that was on fire, it's going to take a long time before trees grow and sprout seeds and grow and sprout seeds and grow and sprout seeds that can reach you. You know what I'm saying? So in the really big fires, we have to drop seeds to encourage the recovery. That's what they were doing up in our hillsides. That green stuff is like paper mache to anchor the soil too, to prevent erosion. Yeah?
I remember like I went to Yellowstone a couple years ago, like five years ago, something like that. And when I was there, like, there was this massive block of this like super early stage like, trees, and nothing but tiny trees for miles and miles. I guess for example.
Yeah, so you can imagine if that patch had been big enough, you'd have a ring of that stuff, and in the middle there wouldn't have been any of that yet. Right? So the scary thing is, these fires have too much fuel, so they get too hot. they get too big, and these may not recover. In some places, here comes the key issue. I hope you've been following because I'm going to tie together a term from last unit. Sometimes this will get pushed all the way back to primary succession. Do you remember what primary succession is? The recovery of soil when you've lost the soil entirely. Remember, if you have to rebuild soils, we're talking about 10,000 years recovery time instead of 2 years recovery time. This is our big issue. We've been preventing fires all over U.S. wilderness. Now we realize that just made things worse for fire in the wilderness. And by the way, because they get hotter and spread faster, it's also riskier for people. Apparently my weird rubbery head sculpture is too distracting. Number 26. There was supposed to be a bunch of issues there. A few of these are important, some of them are not. I really have to assume you've done the homework. Would you like to ask me anything about the issues in number 26? Sustainability, clear cutting, old growth, plantation, stream protection, national forest, forest fire certification, management scale. Yeah?
What is clear cutting?
So clear cutting is when you get rid of everything. We'll talk about this in a couple of study goals, but it's when you cut down the entire landscape. The way that people cut down grass with like a weed whacker, you know, you just like cut down everything.
What's like the main problem?
So the main benefit is it's super profitable and really fast and really safe. Like logging industry is built on clear cutting. Almost all of our lumber is clear cut. It's kind of like the only way to do it. It's really, really good for economics. It's just really bad because there's nothing left to anchor the soil, so you get horrible erosion, and there's no habitat left. So you like totally erase ecosystems. Anybody want to ask me other ones of those issues? I'd like to make a distinction with vocabulary. Please look at number 26. What is old growth? Yes?
The trees that haven't, like, an area that hasn't been cut down yet?
Yeah, that's right. So you mean you got a bunch of old trees?
Yeah.
Tricked them. I did that on purpose. No! It's not a bunch of old trees.
It's just not been cut down yet.
It hasn't been cut down yet, so if nobody's been there, are there going to be some old trees? But are there going to be some baby trees?
Yeah.
A little of everything. Old growth does not mean old trees. Old growth does not mean old trees. Old growth means old forest. That's all types of trees. Anybody want to ask me another part of number 26?
You said some were important and some weren't. Those should be important ones.
I'd say the most important stuff in there is concepts of clear cutting, that vocabulary definition I made. And you know, I guess we should probably talk about tree farming, plantations. But we'll do that in number 28. Check it out, kids. I hope you have all of this in your notes. If not, here's your chance. For number 28, clear cut, shelter wood, seed tree, selective thinning, strip logging, and plantation. I'd like to go over all of these really quickly. You may have this already. And the drawings are just in case you're confused, so you'll know what you're talking about. You should know what they look like and understand the concept. You may not need the drawings. I hope you're ready. I do have to go kind of fast on this. Okay, here we go. Clear cutting is like it looks. You cut down everything. Because it's fastest and safest, it's also the most profitable. Almost all of our lumber in North America is clear cut. It really is sort of the only way to do it. Like harvesting corn, you just cut it all down at once. Any alternative is much more expensive. The problem is it's also the most ecologically devastating. By far, the erosion and habitat loss mean this is basically like dropping a nuclear bomb. Very slow recovery. Ecologically speaking, clear cut is like a giant eraser. You just erase the ecosystem. Nothing left. You don't even have soil ecology because of the erosion. You go like, literally if you get enough erosion, it's back to primary succession. It's like lava flow, like totally erasing the landscape. It's one of our biggest landscape impacts, as a matter of fact. So some of the hippies say, wait a minute, we should just go the opposite extreme. Just get rid of the old and the diseased. That's called shelter wood. You just get rid of that old one and that sick one and that old one and that sick one. In other words, you're just cleaning up the forest. This is just the old and sick. If you just get rid of the old and the sick, you know the forest will usually work even better. This is considered to be ecologically kind of nice. Of course, why would a logging industry ever want to do shelter wood cutting? They don't need old sick trees. There's no money in that. Now, imagine if you could clear cut, but instead of getting rid of all the seed sources, please look up, just leave a couple of the beautiful big mamas to drop seeds. Those are called seed trees. And this speeds up the recovery because you've left seed sources, the trees come back right away. And of course the logging industry kind of likes it because you get a lot of lumber. The problem is, ecologically speaking, that's still basically clear cutting. If you got a couple of trees in the middle of like a Mad Max desolate landscape, that's still a Mad Max desolate landscape. So this is almost clear cutting in terms of impact, very low diversity because you've only left a couple of seed sources. Am I going too fast? There's the dream, I think. Oh yeah.
Is selective cutting the same as shelter?
It's pretty close, yeah. Selective is taking really choice stuff, so it's just the best lumber. Here's the part that a lot of my students don't understand about clear cutting. In clear cutting, you get rid of everything, but that's not because you want everything. It's just easier to find the good stuff. It's like me killing all of you just because I want some flannels. Like, it'll be easier to grab the flannels if there's no other people in the way. But there's not actually that many flannels in the audience here. You know what I'm saying? Everybody's looking for flannels? Okay. It's just Mel and Bodie and Ryan. Is that it? I have an eye for flannel. Okay, watch. In selective, rather than cut down everything just for the ones you want, you do a little bit more work to take just the few that are the best. That minimizes the impact, but of course, that's expensive, slow, and unsafe for loggers. Yeah?
When it's unsafe, does that mean like loggers like getting injured?
Yeah. You know, logging is actually one of the most dangerous jobs in the U.S. Protecting and replacing your work crew is one of the biggest expenses. And so this is really cheap in terms of insurance because you've just got 2 or 3 operators inside really big cars with a giant safety buffer. They're these huge machines. Here, you've got dudes slinging saws in the middle of a forest dropping trees. And dropping trees is always kind of dodgy. You can drag down unexpected trees. You might find that one was leaning against it, so you drop this one and this one kills the logger. It's actually kind of dodgy. Logging is pretty dangerous. Yeah?
Wait, for the shelter we're doing, are you saying it doesn't cost money, or you feel like logging is supposed to be?
It doesn't get you.
No profit.
Oh.
No yield. Watch this. In selective, you get about 90% the yield compared to clear cutting. It's almost as many trees that you actually take away, but it costs a lot more. A lot of people who are pushing for sustainable logging are trying to force selective logging. And just so you know, my hunch is we will do what's called selective thinning, where we say, look, you can log 1 acre chunks in every 100 acres. So you can pick the best 1 acre, do a little miniature clear cut that's sort of selective and it kind of makes patchiness. I sort of think that's the way our national park and national forest will go in your lifetime. We will allow limited logging in little patches, selective clear cutting, to make it profitable enough for the logging companies, but be a way that we can get thinning without using taxpayer dollars. Okay. Thinning is the most natural option to recover from fire prevention. You just space out trees better. How many of you have driven to Yosemite in your memorable lives from Santa Barbara? So if you drove from Santa Barbara, you probably went up the coast or up the 5 until you hit Highway 41 near Fresno. You may remember driving through a place called like Oakhurst. Right before you went into the Wawona entrance to Yosemite, it's the south entrance. There's a Wawona grove of giant sequoias right next to that entrance. You drive past a golf course with a big white, like Southern Plantation style hotel called the Wawona Hotel. And then you drive about an hour to get into the valley when you're inside the park. If you did that drive, you've driven through one of these forests. About 10 or 12 years ago, I remember that forest used to be all overgrown, and I got super grumpy that the government was spending like unknowable hundreds of millions of dollars to thin out that forest, lower the fuel load. Then when natural fires came through, that protected the big trees. Now when you drive through, that's a natural looking forest with spaced out big trees and very little fuel in between them. That was an actively thinned forest. Anybody have plans to go to Yosemite in the next few years? Keep your eyes open. When you drive in the south entrance, you'll notice that thinned out forest between Wawona and the valley. Okay, strip logging. Just so you know, it's like strip farming. You're clear cutting in ribbons. They're like strips of clear cut. That prevents erosion, but it's otherwise the same ecologically because of the habitat impacts and the loss of diversity. And now tree farms. This is such a complex thing for me to say. Like, if you're half asleep like I am, I gotta warn you, this is one of the issues left over from number 26, which is like a really delicate political topic. Tree plantations, I hope you get this right. Because you're not involved in environmental activism too much, you may not know that there's this raging battle between forestry nerds and the lumber industry. The lumber industry loves old growth forest. There's like so much wood waiting to be logged that the lumber industry loves to cut old growth. And once they've cut it, they usually own the land, so they'll build tree farms in their place. You know what I mean by tree farms? Like a Christmas tree lot, where you plant a bunch of trees of one species. Does everybody understand why tree farms are ecologically scary? Monoculture, exactly. Like a Christmas tree lot, the problem with tree farms is that they're just one species. That's not good ecologically. You understand that, right? Diversity is good, monoculture is bad. Monoculture is fragile, has very few ingredients, has very few ecological functions.
But doesn't it provide timber for like the whole world that compared to the small percentage of like the forest?
That's right. And so the flip side is we still need lumber. We still need trees. So for lumber that we have to use in terms of construction, we should be farming it. There's probably nicer ways to farm it too, like slightly polycultured farms. But here's the one thing I gotta warn you about, the political debate. The logging industry argues that old growth is quote unquote stagnant in terms of carbon cycling, and that tree farms cure climate change by soaking up carbon so quickly, because when you farm the trees, they grow really fast because they're all spaced out and they're all babies that are growing quickly. So here's the part I need you to look out for. This is a political issue. The logging industry says, get rid of the old growth, make tree farms, they'll provide us with lumber forever, and they help cure climate change. But the trade-off in ecological functionality is really bad. That's like saying get rid of nature, turn everything into farms. I gotta warn you, we're down to 3% of our old growth protected. Everything else has either been turned into tree farms or will soon be turned into tree farms. Be very careful when you hear the logging industry make this distinction. Yes, tree farms soak up carbon very quickly. No, they are not ecologically a replacement for a real forest. Yeah.
Is the tree farm down the coast of it, the palm tree farm, they use that, like, I didn't think palm trees were good for, like, logging production, but what do they use it for?
That used to be a landscaping palm tree farm, so they would sell those just for landscaping.
Yeah.
B, that's actually, if I'm not mistaken, that's been out of business for about 4 years.
But the trees are still just there.
And so the person who owns that land has kept the trees, but that's kind of a stagnant business. It hasn't been making money.
Because once you buy the palm trees, you're going to have them for like a long time, so you don't have to buy them again.
I guess. All right. Anybody want to talk about number 28, these different logging strategies? Yes?
Can I get the pros and cons for thinning and strip cutting?
Sure. Thinning is a really good way to protect the forest from future fires. The problem with thinning is it's super expensive. It's like the most labor for the least money. That's basically hiring gardeners to fix the forest with no profit to loggers. So thinning, at its extreme, is the most expensive with the least yield. It's a bunch of work with no lumber coming out. Strip cutting is clear cutting that prevents erosion. It's like rotational clear cutting. So it is a little bit better than clear cuts because you're preventing erosion with those bars that catch the soil. Hopefully that makes it recover faster. But in the end, you are going to cut down everything. You're just cutting it down in alternating strips. So it's most of the impact of clear cutting, but it is clearly better. Anybody else want to ask me about number 28? The last one I want to do today is number 30. First of all, we should talk about the causes of direct deforestation. Does anybody know the number one reason that people cut down woody material worldwide? It's not paper.
Agriculture and settlement.
What?
Agriculture and settlement.
That's actually like numbers 3 and 4. Anybody know number 1? What's the one thing everybody in the world can do with woody material?
Firewood.
Firewood, that's right. How many of you knew that the primary energy source worldwide is not a fossil fuel? It is actually just plain old firewood. Of all human energy, the biggest slice is still firewood. I personally find that super surprising. You would think like petroleum, coal, but no, number 1 is firewood. So the main reason that we cut down woody material worldwide is just to make heat, fire. Number 2 is ranching. Number 3 is agriculture. Number 4 is settlement. But the scarier thing is that worldwide, we keep losing more and more and more and more forest, not to directly logging, but to indirect deforestation. Anybody know what that is?
Like erosion?
Please don't pack up. I'm going to wait until we're done with this issue. What?
Erosion?
Not erosion.
Nothing leads to pollution at sea.
It is either climate change or pollution. When we do stuff that gets rid of trees, but we're not there to cut down the trees.
Isn't that like acid rain and like ozone?
Acid rain is one of the things, other types of pollution, but the fastest growing type of indirect deforestation is now climate change. People argue that in the next 100 years, North America will lose more trees to climate change than to chainsaws. Those of you who visit Mammoth or Colorado, you've probably heard about the pine pitch beetles. These beetles that drill holes in the tree that kills them and the trees turn brown and the whole forest dies. Little changes in climate really affect insect populations. So even though trees love warm weather, climate change isn't killing the trees. Climate change is helping the stuff that kills the trees. Okay, that's all I had to say about indirect deforestation.